Hello, everyone, and welcome to Where the Babies Roam, a shark tagging adventure. I'm Kylie Van Wingard, your moderator for today, and we have an exciting event up for you all. Get ready to dive into the world of ocean giants because today we're going on an epic journey to meet some very cool top ocean predators. We're here off of Carpinteria at one of the few sites where the babies roam, which is to say one of the few juvenile white shark nurseries off the coast of California. Great white sharks from ages 0 to 6 socialize, hunt, and grow here. These great white sharks are some of the most amazing predators in the ocean, and what is even incredible is that the scientists that we have here today are working hard to learn all about them, and you get to be right here with us live. We'll be joined shortly by our host, Gwen Goodmanlowe, and our resident white shark researcher, Dr. Chris Lowe from CSU Long Beach's Shark Lab. These guys are out on the water right now looking for sharks to study, and together we're going to learn more about their anatomy, their biology, and their role in the ocean ecosystem. Today show you some cool behind-the-scenes actions and get up close and personal some of the ocean's most misunderstood and most magnificent creatures. Throughout the show, don't forget to throw any questions that you might have in the chat feature, and we will get to those questions at the end. All right, let's go ahead. You guys have heard enough from me. Let's hear from Dr. Lowe.
Hello, I'm Dr. Gwen Goodmanlowe, and I'm your host today. And I'm actually a marine mammologist, but today we're learning about white sharks with Dr. Chris Lowe, who is the director of the Shark Lab. We also have some amazing crew on our boat today. We have our boat driver, Zach Merson. Hi, Zach. We have our drone pilot, Anthony McGinnis. And last but not least, we have our amazing camera woman, Ava Dominichelli. All right, so let's get started today.
Let's get started.
Okay, so the first thing we have to talk about is we are in an area that is considered to be a nursery ground for white sharks. So, Dr. Lowe, can you explain to us what is a nursery ground and what does it have to do with white sharks?
Yes, so think of this like a playground, right? Anywhere from kindergartners up through 6th graders. So this is kind of where these young sharks come in after they're born, and they'll hang out here because it's safe. So white sharks are born live. Females give birth to live babies, and they're completely on their own. So we think they seek out these locations because they're safe, because the water's warm, and there has to be lots of food because they spend weeks to months here, cruising back and forth, trying to grow. So the things that they like to eat are found here in abundance.
So let's go back to the safety issue of it. So what predators do white sharks have then?
Ooh, okay.
Or baby white sharks? Let's start with baby white sharks since this is a nursery for them to be safe. What would be their predators? Why do they have to be here to be safe?
So the problem is when they're born, they're completely on their own and they don't know what a predator is yet. They just know by instinct they need to be someplace safe. So by coming into really shallow water, and by the way, we're only in 10 feet of water right here.
Wow.
We're very close to the beach.
Wow.
We've seen those sharks actually within 3 feet of water. So by being in shallow water, this is a safe place because large predators don't come into these habitats.
But what would their large predators be here in Southern California?
So bigger sharks, of
Okay.
course, will eat them. Orcas will eat them.
Okay.
So there are a lot of predators found around coastal California that don't come into these areas because it's so shallow.
Interesting. So, so Kylie said that they would come here between the ages of 0 to 6 years old. So if age 0 is when they're coming, does that mean that they're born here too?
Ooh, great question. So we don't know actually where they're born. We just know starting around April or May, the smallest white sharks start showing up at these beaches. Now, a small white shark, a newborn, is probably around 4.5 feet long. That's about the size of a 4th grader. So a female will give birth to anywhere from 2 to 15 babies at a time that are that size. And then again, they're completely on their own. So they'll show up here as babies, they'll hang out here, they may migrate somewhere else and then come back here year after year until they're about 6 years old. When they're 6 years old, they're now 9 feet long.
Wow.
So they grow a foot a year.
Wow.
For their first 6 years, and they come back to the same playground, if you will.
Okay. So how do you know they're a newborn then?
Ooh, that's another good question. So sometimes when we catch them, we flip them upside down, they'll have this red, like belly button scar. So they don't have an umbilicus like other sharks. That scar is from their yolk when they were in their mom, and it will be red and raw. And that's how we know they've probably been born within a week. And then that scar heals over time and it'll turn white and then eventually disappear. So by the time they're 3 years old, that scar starts to disappear and it turns white after the end of their first year. So we can kind of estimate how long they've been out of mom based on that scar.
Okay, I have 2 questions related to that. I'll have to try to remember the second one. The first one is, what do you mean yolk and umbilicus? What are those 2 things mean? I mean, you're talking about an egg? There's an egg inside the mom, or what? How does
Absolutely. And reproduction in sharks is so cool. So, for example, they have internal fertilization. And then what happens is the mom will produce an egg, and that egg will pass, it'll get fertilized. And then the embryo will develop off the yolk like a chicken.
Huh.
But the yolk's gone by the time the baby is this big.
But do they have little like chicken eggs, like hard shelled eggs inside the mom's body?
No, the yolks are big.
Okay.
And that's where all the good nutrients are, in this big oil-filled yolk.
Okay.
And that yolk is gone by the time they're this big.
Okay.
But remember,
Oh.
they're born at 4.5 weeks.
So what happens when the yolk is gone but they're not born yet?
That's the other cool thing. Their moms will continue to release eggs, and the embryos will eat the eggs in the mom's uterus, in the mom's tummy.
Cannibalism.
Well, not
No.
really. They're just
Why?
eating eggs. They're egg eaters.
All right.
And they'll get these big giant Buddha bellies full of eggs, and
Okay.
that'll help them grow to about this big.
Wow.
Remember, they're born this big.
Right.
So the last thing the mom does is her uterine wall becomes very fuzzy, like a shag carpet, and
Huh.
it secretes this material that the embryos drink. And it almost looks like buttermilk. It's super
Wow.
rich. And the embryos drink that, and that is their final form of nutrition.
That's amazing. Now, can 15 baby sharks really like make it to the 4 feet long? Like 4 feet times 15 sharks? That's a lot of shark in a mom's belly. Like, how is that possible?
Exactly. And those moms look like they've swallowed a Volkswagen.
Wow.
They get huge. So, and of course, it takes probably 12 to 14 months to incubate those babies. And females can be somewhere off of Hawaii for a year and a half before they come back, somewhere in California, to give birth to their babies. And then they show up at our nurseries.
Okay, I'm going to leave that other question I was thinking about for a second and go back to another question I have. And that is, you said that moms give birth to between 2 and 15 babies. Now, I know in some species of animals, I'm a marine mammalogist, so when it's a new mom, she doesn't have as much experience and body fat and everything. So is the number of babies that the mom produces related to age or experience, or is it completely random, or do they know?
We don't know.
Okay.
Is the honest truth. So the problem is very few adult female white sharks that are pregnant have been caught. So everything we know about their reproduction comes from those very few sharks. So that's how we know kind of the differences in how many pups they give per litter. But we don't know whether bigger females can carry more pups and those pups get bigger, or whether some of those females will just produce a few pups that are really big at birth.
Okay.
So remember, the bigger the baby, the safer it'll be
Right.
its first year.
Right. Okay, that reminds me of another question, and that is, sharks are not warm-blooded; they're not endotherms, and so similarly, turtles, sea turtles, and snakes and things like that are also not warm-blooded. And you can the number of males versus female eggs changes by the external environmental temperature that they're exposed to. So do we see that in sharks at all? So is it always going to be a 50-50 ratio of males to females in the mom, or do we know anything about that when they the sharks have died and they've cut them open? What kind of sex ratio do they see of the babies in there?
So it looks like for most species of sharks, it is 50-50.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yep, by and large. It may vary a little bit, but by and large, it's 50-50. And females get bigger than males. They tend to grow faster than males. And the other cool thing about most species of sharks, including white sharks, is that males and females separate for most of the year. And the only time they come together is occasionally to feed and to mate.
Okay. So that brings me circle back to the question I was going to ask you before, and that is, all right, so the babies start showing up here in the spring, and then you said they kind of go away and they come back, sometimes or whatever. So my question is, are these juvenile white sharks in this nursery area all year round? Because, in Southern California, we have pretty mild weather. We don't have a strong winter. So would we see these babies here all year round? You know what I mean? Or are they actually going somewhere?
Well, it used to be they were only here in the summer.
Okay.
And in the winter, when the water temperature dipped below 60 degrees, that was too chilly, they would migrate to Baja. They would go to Mexico where it was warmer in the winter.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, of course, they're smart. They're smart that way. But the other cool thing that I forgot to mention is that white sharks are one of the unique species that can keep their bodies warmer than the water.
Wow.
So the
But
way,
they're not warm-blooded.
technically, yes.
Okay. Technically, yes or no?
Technically, yes.
Okay.
Because they can keep their body core warmer than the water that they're swimming through. The
Interesting.
problem is when they're babies,
Yeah.
their bodies are so small,
Right.
they're not big enough to keep the heat very long. So even though they can keep their muscles warmer, as long as they're swimming, they can keep their body core warmer. But because their bodies are so small, they lose a lot of that heat. So in many ways, they act like a cold-bodied shark, a cold-blooded shark,
Okay.
until they're about 2 years old.
Okay.
Then they have the mass, the body mass, to keep their bodies warm enough, even when the water's colder.
Okay, but the thing is, for most animals, even humans, we know that after we eat a big meal, we start to get really hot because when we feed, our metabolism is speeding up and it's creating body temperature, internal body temperature for us. So, are the babies, even though they're small and they have a hard time with that, does them feeding on whatever they're going to feed on? We'll get to that next. Does feeding them help with feeding? Does their feeding help with keeping them warm at all?
It probably does.
Okay.
Yeah, because anytime we eat a meal, it does warm things up.
Right.
Because there's all these enzymes breaking down the food, and a lot of energy is being spent to break that down, and it creates heat. So that does happen. But again, they probably don't eat very often. They don't eat as much as we do.
Okay.
And they don't eat as big a meal. So
Okay.
therefore, they're not getting as much heat out of that. Most of that comes from swimming and ingenious circulation.
Okay. So you said they don't eat as much as we do. So most people eat, 2 to 3 meals a day. Some people like me snack all day long. So how long can a white shark go without feeding? I've heard 2 weeks. I've heard, a month. What is there a guideline for that?
So first of all, have you had a snack lately?
I
All
did.
right. So the interesting thing is we are what we call homeotherms, which means we spend a huge amount of energy keeping our bodies constantly warm and at the same temperature. And to do that, we have to feed the furnace, which means we have to eat a lot. Now, these sharks, even though they keep their body warmer than the water, their metabolisms are generally much lower. So people, for example, a kid, will burn 2,500 calories per day. Let's say a Snickers bar is worth 500 calories. If you eat 5 Snickers bars, you've taken in your 2,500 calories per day. These little sharks may only be burning about 400 calories per day.
Wow.
So as a result, they don't have to eat as much.
Okay, so what do they eat though? We haven't talked
Yes.
about what are they eating when they're here? Because they're in this shallow environment, and what are they feeding on?
So we've done studies looking at what food could be here that they
Okay.
could be feeding on, and one of the number one things we find they eat are things in the bottom.
Okay.
So stingrays, we call them pancakes. Round stingrays are round like a pancake, and there's lots of those. Bat rays,
Okay.
and then of course we have flat fishes like flounders and halibut, and then we have croakers and surf perches. All these species live in the bottom, and they're all good baby food. So those are the sorts of things that they like to eat. Oh, our drone's coming in. We're going to change batteries and go back out, and hopefully Anthony's going to find us a shark in a minute. Coming back down.
Okay, so stingrays have a venomous spine on their tail.
They-
So what happens when
Yeah, so when a white shark eats a stingray, it might get stung, but they don't care.
really?
Yeah, so we find stingray spines stuck in their jaws, stuck in their stomachs.
Wow.
They can tolerate that. They're tough critters. They
Okay,
really are tough.
okay.
And of course, they're learning how to do it and not get stung.
Okay,
So there's probably a lot of learning involved,
Okay.
but in that learning process, they probably get quite a few spines.
that's really interesting. Okay, so the main prey then they're feeding on are stingrays, you would say.
That's their favorite.
Oh, that's their
Because
favorite.
they're some of the biggest things you'll
Okay,
find around here,
interesting.
and they're the most abundant.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, so let's talk about how do you go about studying these sharks? You do something known as tagging, is that correct?
Absolutely. And that's something that we're trying to do right now. But to tag, we got to find them.
Okay.
Right? So that process starts with drones.
Okay.
So drones have really changed how we study sharks because it's small, it's light, it's cheap. My students are pilots, so they can fly and we can stay fairly close to the boat. So if they see a shark, a couple football fields away, we can run over to it. And the drone tells us exactly where the shark is. Once we find the shark, the next step is we have to tell if it's a male or a female. So to do that, we have a camera on the end of a pole that we can stick underwater. So Kylie, can you show the footage of how we dip the camera under to tell if it's a male or a female?
Hey everybody, we seem to have lost Chris and Gwen. All right, well, in that clip that you guys just saw, that was a female shark, and when we get Chris and Gwen back, they'll tell you how we know about that. What we can see is we can see them from a distance, because luckily we do have a second camera over on the Phyllis Ann. And here's Chris and Gwen again.
Okay.
So you can kind of see how we can tell whether it's a male or female. So males have claspers, 2 projections coming off the pelvic fins. Those are males, and they're born with those. So they have them even when they're little babies, and they get bigger as they get adults. Now, once we know whether it's a male or female, the next step is to tag it. So to do that, we can drive right up alongside the shark using the drone, and we can see the shark, and then we can put a tag in their back. We can pop that in their back like a little dart. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But Kylie's going to show you some footage of how we get close to these sharks and dart tags in their back. So this is what one of the acoustic transmitters looks like. So this actually produces a sound that is higher than the sharks can hear. And this actually is being detected by our receivers that are located all around this area. So it enables us to track the sharks when they're in close to shore. This is the dart that goes just beneath the skin, and this hangs off like an earring. So this actually pokes in and it allows us to track the shark while they're moving through the water.
Okay.
So these transmitters stay in about 3 years, and after that, it works its way out and falls off.
So tell me exactly what kind of scientific information you're getting with this little transmitter right here.
So this transmitter is kind of a special one. This one measures acceleration. So it tells us how active the sharks are, how fast it is swimming, and when it's moving really slowly. But it also has a pressure sensor on it, so we can tell how deep the shark is. So even when we're not here, our acoustic receivers are constantly listening for these tags. Dive here. We pull the dive here. We pull the receiver when tag sharks were nearby, and we have about 27 receivers in this area in a grid. And the cool thing is, if a shark is detected by 3 or more receivers at the same time, it will log the location of that tag.
Okay.
So we can actually track up to 25 individuals in this area over time.
That's amazing.
It is really cool, and it gives us a lot of information about what environmental conditions they prefer.
Okay, so the receivers are getting like water temperature and things like that, not through this, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So that way we know the temperature at different depths.
Got it.
And we can tell, do they have a favorite temperature that they like while they're at this beach?
Oh, interesting. And does it also tell you like, okay, so we have something known as a thermocline here, where the upper layers of the water are warmer and the bottom ones are colder. So can you also see if they're like hanging out more in the water, in the warmer, or more in the cooler, or does that change during the day? How do you determine that?
It does. So the water temperature is very dynamic, which means it's changing even with the tide. So the water temperature can change like 6 or 7 degrees Fahrenheit over the course of the tide.
Wow.
And vary by spots.
Okay.
So the sharks are going to the spots that are warmest.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Yeah. And the upper reaches of the water, the upper surface parts are warmer than the bottom.
Okay.
So if they want to warm up, they just come to the surface.
But you can tell. You can tell all of that. That is a sharp instrument. You can tell all that from the receivers and these data that you're collecting from these transmitters?
Yes.
Okay.
So it tells us what is their favorite temperature and where they want to be. In fact, one of the interesting things is sometimes we can sneak up to them when they're right at the surface because they're moving very slowly, and we think they're almost in a form of sleep.
Okay, interesting. So sharks sleep. I never would have known that.
Yeah, so we have another type of tag that we call smart tag that we can put on these sharks. This gets clamped onto its dorsal fin like a little backpack. It's got a 3D accelerometer, gyroscope, so it's telling us every motion the shark makes 30 times a second.
That's amazing.
It's got a temperature and depth sensor. It's got an acoustic transmitter so we can follow it from a boat. And it's got a video blocker so we can see what the shark sees.
Oh.
So this stays on the shark for 24 hours.
Okay.
and after 24 hours, it pops off.
Okay.
So we've tagged some sharks with this, and one of the things we found is during certain times of day, they'll swim in a circle, like a 30-foot diameter circle in one direction for 20 minutes.
Wow.
Then they'll reverse and go the opposite direction for 20 minutes.
Wow.
And then reverse again. They'll do that for 4 hours.
Really?
So
Wow.
we think that's how a white shark that must continuously swim in order to breathe makes them.
That's so interesting. So, so getting back to the transmitter for a second. So, you know, for marine mammals, a lot of times they put the tags that they want to use. They'll put them, you know, in their flippers, right? So, do you tag this in the dorsal fin or the caudal fin of the shark, or in the back or the mouth? How do you do that?
That's a great question. So we typically want to get the transmitter right next to the dorsal fin in the back. In fact, we have some cool footage. Kylie, would you like to share that footage? So that transmitter will probably stand for about 3 years.
Okay.
And eventually they work their way out and they just fall off.
Okay, so
Yeah.
do we talk about why sharks don't really get sick? Like okay, if you jab something in my skin, I'd probably get an infection. So you're jabbing this into the skin of a shark, and there's lots of bacteria in the water and viruses in the ocean. So do they get sick from this? Does this harm them at all?
So that's always a concern. Our number one question is making sure that sharks are safe, right? So we're always asking, are we doing the right things? Are we trying to take into consideration their health? So we're always very careful about that. But people have been tagging fish and sharks for decades, and we get to see them and recapture them, so we know they're doing okay. In fact, even when we tag them, quite often they'll just take off for a few seconds and then settle right down. Our biggest challenge is not tagging that same shark again.
Wow, that's so interesting. So they don't seem to care that much.
They don't. And then the next question is healing, so it doesn't
Right.
harm them. Now, some of the sharks, if we catch them, we can flip them upside down and put them in what is called tonic immobility. They go to sleep.
Wow.
And we can make an incision into their abdomen and stick the transmitter into their body, suture them back up, flip them over, and they swim away. Now, those transmitters that we put in the sharks last 10 years. So we can track the sharks from being babies well into their teenage years.
Wow, that's interesting. But they're bigger than this one, right? This one's pretty small.
Correct. They are
Okay.
bigger than that, and they only pulse every 100 to 300 seconds.
Okay.
So what that means is when they're swimming through here, they could swim past the receiver and not be detected.
Oh.
And that's why we need so many receivers out.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Okay, so the ones that are on their dorsal fin, did you say those were satellite tags?
So we have other transmitters that we do put on their dorsal fins. So some of those transmitters that go on their dorsal fins actually use powerful radio waves. So that means they only transmit when the shark's at the surface. So when the fin breaks the surface and the antenna is sending a signal to satellites in orbit, it will send me a text alert or an email telling me that this shark was detected at this latitude, longitude, time, and date. But when the shark goes back underwater, it turns off. So it only works when the sharks are at the surface. They don't have to come to the surface to breathe. So then we use another type of satellite transmitter that gets darted into the shark's back, hangs off like an earring. Those transmitters have temperature, light, and depth sensors. Wow. It's recording pre-described time and date that pops off, floats up to the surface, uploads all that data, downloads it all to me.
And then what happens to the transmitter? Are you able to retrieve it?
Sometimes we can.
Okay.
We can go out and try to find it,
Okay.
assuming it's not out in the middle of the Pacific.
Okay.
But if we get it back,
Yeah.
we get all the data and we can send it, get rebattered.
Wow.
Those are really expensive. Those are $5,000.
Wow. That's an expensive jewelry for a shark.
Exactly.
Say.
So I think we're about ready for some questions.
All right. We should have some questions from Leo.
All right, guys. So viewers who are watching today, we have a super awesome guest with us. We have the 2024 NOAA Youth Ambassador. This is Leonardo Lin. He is from Korean Youth Lutheran High School here with us. And Leonardo brought a bunch of questions. And then I can also see that you are all sending in so many great questions. So we'll start with Leo's questions and we'll get to your guys' questions after. So Leo, go ahead, take it away. Oh no. All right. So we had this last live stream. Unfortunately, Leo's microphone's not working again. So we're going to play a little bit of telephone. Chris and Gwen, Leo wants to know if sharks hunt in packs or are they solitary?
Oh, that's a really good question. So most species do not. There are some species of sharks that do hunt in groups. So reef white tips are kind of known to do that. Seven-gill sharks will do that. White sharks are kind of solitary animals. They don't. They like to be kind of by themselves. So they're a little bit more loners. So it depends on the species.
Okay, very cool. All right, Leo, go ahead and send me your next question. All right, that's a good one. Leo wants to know, when you tag the sharks, do you name them, or are they identified by like a tag number? Is there any sort of naming system?
Yeah, we don't name our sharks. That's a really good question, but we do give them a number. So every shark that gets a tag gets its own ID number. And so far, we have tagged almost 600 white sharks. And we have 300 white sharks currently swimming around with active transmitters in them.
That is a crazy number of sharks. All right, Leo, let's get one more question from you. This is a good one. Leo wants to know, how can we reduce human white shark interactions? And I guess I would further that question to also ask, are human white shark interactions unsafe? How can we safely go to the beach?
Man, that's a great question, Leo. So one of the things that we've learned using our drones is that when people are out swimming and surfing, there's baby white sharks around them all the time. And they seem to ignore people. So when we're sharing these nurseries with these sharks, by and large, we're flotsam. We're things that just float on the surface that don't even know the sharks are there most of the time. So this is really good news. This means that we have learned to share the environment with the animals. So what I always tell people is, look, if you're out there, you should always assume white sharks are around. It's their home. We're visitors in their home. But that doesn't necessarily mean we need to be scared of them. So one of the things we always tell people is always assume they're there, but stay together, stay in a group. You're always safer in a group. We see fewer bites on people if you're in a group. And basically, if something should happen, even if you should get tired and need help getting back to the beach, you have somebody there to help keep you safe. So stay in a group is the safest thing. If you see a shark, that means the shark wants to be seen. And you should always keep your eye on the shark, always follow the shark. And if you lose track of the shark, where do you think you should look? Behind you. Why? Because that's where sharks like to go to see what something is without being seen themselves.
Okay, we are getting so many questions in the chat features. So I'm going to do my best to have them answer. Chris, you're going to be just as fast as you possibly can answering questions. Our first question, and I'll put it on the screen so everyone can see, how many babies can a shark have at once?
Oh, it depends on the species. So whale sharks can give birth up to 300 babies at a time.
That is an insane number. What about white sharks?
White sharks, 2 to 15 babies, depending on the size of the female and her age.
Okay. All right, next one. How long do sharks live?
Ooh, so white sharks we think can live up to 70 years old. Some species like round stingrays, which is basically a pancake shark, can only live to about 12 years old. But then there's some species like Greenland sharks that we think can live to be over 470 years old.
Oh my goodness, they have been around for so long. Speaking of pancakes, because you just mentioned pancakes, somebody wants to know, why do you call stingrays pancakes?
So round stingrays are called round stingrays because they're round and are about the size of a dinner plate, which is my favorite pancake size. And they litter the seafloor, and that's how they hide from predators. But if you're a little baby white shark and you're learning how to hunt, scurping up pancakes off the seafloor is actually pretty easy. So that's why we call them pancake rays. Bat rays are more pointy wings. They flap their wings, but round stingrays undulate their wings and they tend to hide by burying. So that's why we call them pancakes.
Okay. Do mother sharks pass away after giving birth?
No, actually, some sharks give birth to many, many litters. They might have babies out there that are many generations. And because some sharks can live to be 300 and some years old or 400 years old, think about how many babies that female could have given birth in her lifetime. So obviously females give birth to big litters. It takes them time to recover. Mating is very rigorous. Males have to bite females in order to mate with them. So females need a break from that. So they will go off and separate from males, and that gives them time to heal.
All right. This one's a little bit for Chris specifically. Is it dangerous to tag sharks? Are you risking your life every day while you tag sharks?
So it is kind of dangerous, and we do have to be careful. And we spend a lot of time training, and we spend a lot of time teaching people how to be safe around sharks. And more importantly, we want to make sure the sharks are safe while we do this. So we have two groups of animals, safety in mind, our students and mine, and that of the shark. So to do that, we're always thinking about new ways on how to safely handle the animals and keep us safe. Now, when we dive, this is another one of those things that we've learned. In the early days, we used to be a little worried about diving in murky water, in water where we know there are sharks. But now we know that there are sharks around. They probably swim right by us. We can't even see them because the water's so murky, but they don't seem to care. They just seem to ignore us.
Okay, let's do a couple numbers questions. How many sharks live in the ocean, and how many teeth do sharks have?
Ooh, those are tough questions. So actually the numbers are changing. We think there's probably around 700 species of sharks, and the numbers are going up. And the reason is we're discovering new ones all the time, particularly in the deep ocean where we know nothing. And then the number of teeth varies by species. The longer they live, the more teeth they can produce. Most sharks have about 50 to 100 teeth in their mouth at a time. The entire front row fall out about every 30 days. So a white shark, for example, can produce 30,000 teeth in its lifetime.
That's definitely more teeth than I have, I think. Okay, do sharks have ears, and how do they hear?
Sharks do have ears, but the ears are inside their head. There's no external opening, and they hear vibrations that travel or sound waves that travel through the water. So they hear low frequency sounds because those sounds travel best through the water. So a struggling fish or a sea lion flapping its flippers produce these low frequency sounds that sharks' hearing is very well tuned for. High frequency sounds like we can hear, they can't really hear so well. So their hearing is really well tuned for being in the ocean. But the other thing they have are vibration sensors all along their body, so they can detect water vibrations really well as well.
So that means I'd be safer because I have a higher pitch scream than you do. So.
Speaking of screams, if you are attacked or bitten by a shark, what can you do and how would you survive?
Great question, and that rarely ever happens. But if it does, you should fight back. Let the shark know you're not going to go down easy. You want to hit it in the nose, you want to hit it in the eyes, those are sensitive areas, and they get the shark to release. Now, it's really rare for a shark to come back. Usually the bites, we don't know why, might be on accident, mistaked you for a prey, or you startled or scared it and threatened it in some way. So a good pop in the nose is usually good enough to dissuade the shark.
Okay, so throw them your best left hook. How do sharks breathe?
Oh, how do sharks breathe? So they have gills just like other fish. So they keep their mouths open, they swim through the water passes across their gills, and the shark's gills are removing oxygen from the water as they swim by and releasing carbon dioxide, which is a waste.
All right. What is a shark's top speed? And actually, I'd like to modify this. What is a white shark's top speed? And then what's the fastest shark that's out there?
Ooh, so those are really good questions. So we have a hard time putting speedometers on them, but we think some species like mako sharks can swim up to 28 miles per hour. The way we know they swim that fast is we have a shark, like a white shark, for example, which is closely related to a mako shark, which gets to be about, let's say, 4,000 pounds. That shark can launch its body 8 feet out of the water. So think about how much force and how fast that shark has to be swimming to launch a car out of the water. So Michael Phelps, fastest human in the water that we know of, can only swim about 5 miles per hour at the fastest speed. So these sharks, particularly the makos and white sharks, are very fast.
Okay. A couple more number questions. How many shark species are out there in the world?
Oh, so we don't know for sure, somewhere over 700, and we know the numbers are increasing because we keep discovering new species all the time.
Okay. Hopefully we discover more and more and more. We mentioned this earlier in the live stream, but a couple people have been confused. How can we tell the difference between male and female sharks?
Oh, that's a really good question. So Male and females look different. So males have what are called claspers that extend off their pelvic fins, the fins on the bottom that would be where their legs would be. So these two fins identify them as males. Females don't have claspers. So that's why we use our dip cam, and that can tell us, even for very small sharks, whether they have claspers or not.
Okay. And then speaking of female sharks, how old are the mothers when they give birth?
So for different species, it varies. For example, white sharks probably don't reach sexual maturity until they're 14 to 15 years old. Some species like Greenland sharks, we think may not become mature until they're 128 years old.
That is so old. Okay. I like this question a lot. Why did you want to do the job that you do?
Oh, well, it's beautiful. We're out in the ocean. It's lovely. I love other animals. I love sharks. They're the most interesting of all the fishes, in my opinion. They have this unique character about them, and they're so different. All these different sharks have all these different body shapes and life histories and physiologies. They're totally fascinating as fishes go. But the thing I love about them is they're top predators, but even things like cookie cutter sharks, my absolute fave, they only take little bites out of animals.
So you say that they're top predators. We usually think of the great white shark as being the top predator in the world. Is there anything that eats a great white shark?
Yes. What is it?
Oh, it might be a marine mammal. You can't help it. Yeah, the orca. The orca is the natural predator of the great white shark. So.
And it's one of the few that can take out an adult white shark. How do they do it?
They hunt in packs, so they're cooperative feeders, and so they'll hunt together in order to take out a white shark.
And that's an advantage over white sharks because they're solitary. Yeah. So orcas, big brains.
Yeah, they communicate.
Yep.
So they can do it.
Exactly. And who rules the roost in the orca families?
The moms.
Exactly.
Moms are the ones that are doing all the commanding.
They do the shopping.
They do the shopping. They do the shopping for white sharks.
All right. I think we want to finish up with a couple questions here. One thing I know that people might want to know is how can if somebody wants to study sharks, Chris, how could someone go about doing that?
Oh, that's a great question. And we have a great program. We have a great K through 12 program where we come into schools, we talk about this. So you can be a biologist and be interested in sharks, or a marine biologist, right? But you don't have to be. For example, you could be an engineer. We collaborate with engineers all the time. They help us build new cool tools to study sharks. You could be a computer scientist. All this new technology gathers huge amounts of data. So we work with mathematicians, scientists, physicists. You can be any of those fields and study sharks. You can even be a journalist or a communication major or a film major or even an artist. So we collaborate with all these different groups. In fact, I even collaborate with psychologists. They help us understand how people think about sharks. So you don't have to be a biologist to study sharks. You can be in any of those fields and study sharks.
What I'm hearing is that sharks are for everybody.
Exactly.
Okay.
For everybody. Why wouldn't they be?
Well, they're marine mammals.
All right. Marine mammals are cool too.
Very last question. This one's super cute. How small is the smallest shark?
Oh my God, I love these things. These little pygmy sharks, at full grown, are 8 inches long. They're the size of a cigar. They also call them cigar sharks. At full grown, they're 8 inches long. And, they're little nibblers. They're out there taking little nibbles out of things. And you compare that to the biggest, which is the whale shark, which is 30 feet long, which is the size of a bus. But that's what makes sharks so cool. And they've been around for 400 million years, longer than trees before dinosaurs.
Amazing. All right. Thank you guys so much for sending in all these questions. We've gotten so many more that we didn't get to. I will give all these questions to Dr. Lowe and I will have him answer them for you. We'll send them out to everybody who attended today. Real quick before we log off, Gwen, speaking of marine mammals, I know that you have something coming up in March.
Yeah, so in March, we're doing another live stream down in Baja, Mexico, and we're going to be out there with the gray whales in the lagoons down there where the moms give birth and there's mating going on. And so we'll get to see baby gray whales and some mating and really amazing behaviors where the gray whales come right under the boat with their big eyes and they look at you. They're so expressive because they're marine mammals. Sorry. So that's next March of 2025, and I hope to see everybody there.
And we will send all that information out to those of you who have joined us today. All right. Well, thank you. Goodbye, Dr. Lowe and Dr. Goodmanlowe. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. We so appreciate it, and we love sharing all of this wonderful science that we're able to do out here with you. We will do our best to answer all the questions that you guys sent in, and we'll see you on the next stream.